Joining me today on the show is Ben McAdams, former Democratic congressman who announced that he's getting back into the political arena. He is running in the 1st Congressional District that is part of the new maps that were approved by Judge Diana Gibson last month. We're going to talk about all that. Congressman McAdams, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, great to be with you, Brian. Thank you.
Easy question. Why you? Why now? What motivated you to get back into the arena after being out since 2020?
Brian, over the last year, we have seen such, I've never been more worried about the direction of our country than I've been right now. We've seen, Donald Trump trampling on the Constitution, ripping it up, ordering the political prosecution of his enemies, arresting and detaining U.S. citizens or law-abiding immigrants who have been ripped from their families and carted off to detention centers. The assaults on the Constitution, the attacks on American liberties that we hold so dear has really been troubling to me. And then, not to mention the fact, let me tell you a little bit about me growing up. I grew up. My mom was a school teacher. She raised 6 kids, mostly on her own. We knew a lot of financial insecurity as a kid. I remember times when I was a kid that the power was shut off, that our home was in foreclosure, a lot of stress. And my mother had chronic illness. My sister was a type 1 diabetic, so we also knew the fear of like losing healthcare, losing access to healthcare, what that would mean for our family, and the high cost of healthcare. Medical debt was something that always hung over our family. And I think about it when I was a kid. I got my first job at 11, working on a local farm. I've done and really been working ever since then to put myself through college, working 3 and 4 part-time jobs at a time to put myself through college. But the difference when I was that age is I knew that certainly I had to sacrifice and I had to work hard, but I knew that working hard would mean that I could get a college degree and then I could get a good job and that I could pull myself out of the financial insecurity that really haunted us as kids in my family. I look around today and I just feel like that my kids' generation don't have that same luxury. They don't know that you can work 1 or 2 jobs, you can be in a 2-income household, and you still can't afford the rent. You still can't afford to put food on the table, and you can't afford, and you're afraid to death of what might happen with a medical bill. And these are the times we live in. Now, Donald Trump talks about affordability. He campaigned on affordability, bringing down the costs for American families. It looks like that's been nothing more than a slogan. And so, for me, seeing what's happened over the last year, I just could not sit on the sidelines. I have served before. I think public service is something that I'm deeply committed to, both serving as in the Utah State Senate, serving as the mayor of Salt Lake County, and then serving in the United States Congress. It's service is something. Public service is something that I love. I love being in a position to make a difference, to have an impact on our community, to help to lift people up, to be part of something that's bigger than me, and to really deliver the results that are going to make a difference for people's lives. So when I see what's happening over the course of the last year, I really just decided that this is not something that I can sit on the sidelines. If there's something I can do about it, to push back, to step up and fight for the America that I believe in, that I grew up believing in, to fight for families like the family that I grew up in, and to make a difference. And so for me, this is an opportunity to get back into public service and hopefully earn the support of the voters in this district, because I want to fight to protect our democracy today, and plans for the future to help to bring down costs and to make life better for American families.
Let's talk about the politics of this newly drawn district. It is clearly not the one anyone was expecting to be implemented. Everyone had pretty much focused on the option C map from the Utah Legislature. I know that you started making moves about possibly running for Congress when it looked like we were going to get that option C map. And then all of a sudden, with 15 minutes before the deadline, the judge drops a decision that creates a map that looks to be possibly D+14 in a district centered on Salt Lake County. Does that change your calculation on the kind of coalition of voters you're going to have to build in order to win the Democratic nomination and ultimately a seat in Congress in November. Because, as I pointed out, this district may be D plus 14, but it's not a Democratic majority district. They make up 25% of registered voters. Republicans are still the largest group. So you can't win just relying on Democratic votes. So talk to me about the politics of that and what kind of coalition you're going to have to build.
Yeah, well, first of all, just want to say thank you. Utah Democrats owe a debt of gratitude to, and I think Utah voters generally, not just Democrats, but to the people who led the fight with Better Boundaries, the people who donated to Better Boundaries, who carried signature packets, who talked to voters to get that passed, and then to the League of Women Voters and Mormon Women for Ethical Government for standing up and saying enough is enough. Our voices cannot be silenced, and we want a district that allows voters to choose their representative, not for politicians to choose their voters. And so the whole reason that we're here today is because of those many, many people, hundreds, thousands of people who fought to say, we're tired of boundaries being manipulated to determine the outcome of an election. We were looking at what was happening with this litigation, what was coming forward with the districts. There were 3 maps on the table, as you kind of alluded to. I looked at that, and the district that I won when I was in Congress before was a district that the Cook Political Report rated at R plus 19, so very, very deeply Republican district. In fact, in 2018, it was the most Republican district in the country that a Democrat won. So, we looked at the, one option being leaning slightly Republican, other options leaning more Democrat. And I felt like, again, I said that I just couldn't sit on the sidelines and wanted to, if there's something I could do about it, I was determined to get in and to make a difference. And looked at all 3 of those maps and said, I feel confident that I can earn the trust of support of voters in any 3 of these districts. And so started making the moves to mount a campaign, not knowing exactly what map was going to be, what was going to prevail. And I don't think we even know today what map's going to prevail with the shenanigans that the legislature is trying to push forward. But what I knew was I have a passion for public service, and these are dire times, and we need someone to step forward. We kind of had an indication, I think, when the Utah Legislature conceded that they had used political data in drawing Map C. We kind of knew at that point that that map was going to be in trouble. But this running for me in this district's exciting because for the first time in a long time, Utah voters have a real opportunity to send someone to Washington who can deliver meaningful results for them. Voters deserve someone who's going to work to earn their support, not take it for granted because the boundaries have been manipulated in a way that they're guaranteed a win. I've earned the trust of these voters before. I've won races in this district. I represented the most liberal state Senate district in the state when I was senator representing Senate District 2, which is different than the current Senate District 2, but it was entirely within this district. I represented 100% of this district and won it twice as the mayor of Salt Lake County. And then my congressional district was probably roughly 50% of this district overlapped with my congressional district as well. So I know this community. I've worked with these neighborhoods for years. I understand how to actually move good ideas and put them into action. I think that's the real contrast in this race. Plenty of people can say the right things. They can have the right post on social media. I'm the only candidate with a proven track record of getting things done. I have years of experience working alongside grassroots leaders in these communities and a long track record of accomplishments to show for my work. People talk about this district being D plus 14. Sometimes they just think about this as binary. This is, to your point, this is not a Democratic majority district. This is Democrats, independents, and Republicans. But, having represented this district for over 10 years of my public service, I would say it's even more than that. This is a district that has a strong Vietnamese community that I know well. It has a strong Pacific Islander Marshallese community that I know very well. It has strong, immigrant Hispanic communities. It has a strong faith community, not just LDS faith, but a lot of diverse faiths in this community. And I've been to their churches and know the pastors and have worked alongside them. This has a strong outdoor recreation community. And so when I look at this district, it's not just about, talking to the Democrats. It's about talking to people as individuals. I don't think many of these voters wake up in the morning and say, I'm a Democrat or Republican. They have so many other characteristics that define them. And principally, I think they define themselves right now as people who are struggling to make ends meet, to put food on the table, to pay for the rent. Rent keeps home ownership is almost unattainable. Rent keeps rising, salaries stay flat. I think that's what people wake up in the morning and say is, I can't afford the basic necessities of life. I want somebody who's going to fight for me. And so when I look at this district, not only do I know these communities, I've worked alongside the grassroots leaders. I'll be pointing to projects that I have worked alongside them to achieve: trails and parks and open spaces and libraries and senior centers and community centers, and a whole list of light rail extensions, roads and bridges and other types of infrastructure that I've worked with them to make their communities better. Um, and then programs to help to increase access to people with addiction, and to attain, enter into recovery. These are the type of things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk to voters as if because they're individuals, and highlight the track record of things that I've been able to get done. And we'll be looking at things that I've done in the past. For example, when Utah needed leadership on LGBT equality, this was in 2008, 2009. I stepped forward and led the effort to pass Utah's LGBT non-discrimination law. I brought together civil rights advocates, business leaders, even conservative legislators together. When families needed affordable health care, I worked to expand Medicaid, because every Utahn deserves access to health care without going broke. When parents needed support, I expanded access to childcare as county mayor so that more families can get ahead. So this is not just about saying the right things. For me, this is about electing somebody who can make a difference, who has made a difference on the issues that people are concerned about, and has a plan to achieve these successes going forward. They're not just talking points for me. They're real results that have improved people's lives. And I think that's what this district deserves. Is they deserve representation that's effective on day one, not someday, or not just a tweet or a position, but that's the experience that I offer.
You alluded to it. The battle of these maps is not over with. The legislative shenanigans, we're recording this on Friday. The legislature is going to be going to special session on Tuesday. They're likely going to change the filing dates for the congressional race to give themselves more time to appeal the judge's decision, and hopefully, at least from their point of view, try to either put the option C map into place or even go back to the 2021 boundaries that they passed back then. Do any of those maps change your view of this race, your calculation? If hypothetically the 2021 map is what goes into effect, do you still run in that district, which was gerrymandered to be a solid lock for Republicans?
I think right now people are super frustrated, and I understand it, because they've felt there for 2 decades. They have seen boundaries manipulated to silence their voices, to guarantee for Utah Republicans maximum power for them to at the expense of the voters. And what I've heard over the last several weeks as I've jumped into this race is people are reaching out to me, some of them supporting me, some of them not supporting me. But one thing I've heard universally from them is hope. They feel for the first time in a long time that their voice matters and their vote matters. And, I think that hope is important. I would hope that Utah Republicans, as they go into special session and contemplate whether they're going to exercise another power grab to maximize to give themselves the ultimate power, that they think about what they're doing to our democracy. Because that hope is really the spark of a healthy democracy. That if you want people, they know the system's rigged. And they know the voting system's rigged. They know the economic system's rigged. They know that they work hard and they can't afford the basic necessities of life. And so what they've got with these wins that have been secured with better boundaries is they've got hope. They've got hope in a system that might finally start to reflect their goals. And I think Utah Republicans have to ask themselves, is it worth having one more seat and squashing that hope and that belief in the system, and really doing harm, I think, long-term damage to our democracy. So we have to see what happens over the next months as the legislature tries to force to the issue and to hold on to their power. I think, I would say we've won this before, and we're going to win it again. We've won it on the ballot. We won it in the courts. And if the legislature tries to take away the rights of people to elect their own representatives, then we'll fight and we'll win it again. But this is certainly what we know at this point about what the legislature is going to do. Is this is a fight to stop the voters from selecting somebody, from choosing somebody who represents their values in 2026. It's also about grabbing back for themselves the ability to gerrymander in 2028, 2030, to stop citizens' initiatives of any kind. And so, there's a lot going to be going on in this race. We're not just electing a new member of Congress. We are deciding whether the Utah voters statewide will be deciding whether or not the legislature deserves to have the power to draw boundaries and manipulate boundaries for their ultimate benefit, and whether we should remove the check and balance of citizen initiatives that checks the legislature's ultimate power. And so I see this campaign, and why this campaign is so important is, as I said, it's not just about electing a member of Congress. It's about representing regular people statewide who want a voice, who want to have the ability to hold their elected officials accountable in an election and through citizen initiatives. And so there's going to be a lot playing out here. But as I said, I'm optimistic because I've seen that we've fought this before and we've won it, and I'm up to the fight.
Curious about your relationship with Democratic base voters, the base of the Democratic Party. There is still some simmering discontent about your role in the 2022 U.S. Senate race, where you pushed for the party to not field a candidate so that Evan McMullin as an independent could run one-on-one against Mike Lee. And there are some Democrats who say that was a bad move. But if you look at the numbers, it was wildly successful. It just didn't end up with a win by McMullin. It was the closest U.S. Senate race that we'd had in the state in decades. So by empirical measures, that worked. But there are still a lot of people, at least I'll put it this way, there are still some segments of the Democratic Party, the Democratic base voters, who are very angry about your role in that. They're very angry about not fielding a candidate who would have gotten crushed. I mean, there's no other way to put it. That person would have been crushed, and that would have been what Mike Lee would have been what he would have preferred in that race rather than the close race that he got. How are you navigating that? And I guess, do you have to make amends with certain parts of the party because of that situation? Because I know that there are some very, very staunch Democratic voters who are not happy about your role in that and are not happy that you're going to try to run for Congress as a Democrat.
I'm going to tell a quick story. When I was in law school, and I had a professor who was a mentor of mine, and he had served in elected office before. And I sat down with him and told him that, I was interested someday in running for office. And he said, I have some advice for you. And this was a moment that I remember very clearly. And he said, my first piece of advice for you is you should never run for office. It's the worst job ever. It's controversial. People are going to be mad at you. And, and like, I don't know why you'd ever do that. And I kind of persisted and said, that I want to make a difference. I want to serve and feel that I have, the ability to have an impact on people's lives. And he said, look, if you're really serious about running, and if I can't talk you out of it, then I have some other advice for you. And he said, my advice for you is there are two types of public servants. The first type is as a thermometer. A thermometer is a tool that will tell you what the temperature is in the room. And he said, the second type is a thermostat. A thermostat will change the temperature in the room. He said, if you're ever going to make the sacrifices to go into public service, be a thermostat, change the temperature in the room, fight for what you believe in. So, I look back at the 2022 Senate race. I think Mike Lee had worked with Trump to try and overturn the 2020 election. Mike Lee is a threat to our democracy. Mike Lee does not care about protecting our public lands. He wants to auction them off. He does not care about bringing down the cost for hardworking families. And so Quite frankly, Evan McMullin was the better choice to go up to against Mike Lee and hopefully defeat him. And to your point, Mike Lee spent $20 million to win that election. It was the closest election, U.S. Senate election that we've seen in my lifetime. Usually Utah Republicans just coast to re-election and don't campaign and don't spend any money. Mike Lee had to work for that. Now, I would have preferred to see Mike Lee defeated. But there were a lot of wins from that. I saw thousands of volunteers get engaged that wouldn't have otherwise been engaged. I saw a lot of energy for independents and Democrats coming together in that race. So, when you're in elected office, especially if you're somebody like me who wants to make bold decisions, who's not afraid to stand up for and fight for what I think is the right decision, you're going to make some people mad. And I know that there on numerous issues, there are people who are mad at me about a vote here or a position I worked on there. I want to still earn their support. I respect people who disagree with me. They have a right to disagree. I hope that they can understand that my motivations, like theirs, are to make our country a better place, to make a difference for people who are struggling. And I welcome people having a different opinion and advocating for a different approach. Ultimately, I think the data is true that that Evan McMullin was a stronger candidate to go up against Mike Lee. 92% of Democratic voters agreed with my position. For those who disagree, I respect their differences of opinion. I think Utah Democrats can afford some innovation and to try different approaches to try and break through what's been, through the manipulated and rigged boundaries and gerrymandering that we experience. And, I'd love to engage with those people who, there are plenty of people who are going to disagree with me, and I'd love to be able to earn their support in this election.
I have to ask you this about the nomination process. I was doing a live stream the other night, and a person who is a very harsh critic of yours was claiming in the comments that there was no way that you were going to show up at the convention. You were just going to gather signatures to get on the ballot and skip the convention. I told them they were wrong. So who's right? Are you going to be skipping the convention, or am I right, as I usually am, and you're going to be going to the convention as well?
Yeah, of course I'm going to the convention. I have always been actively involved in Democratic politics. I am a Democrat, and I've always been opposed in every race that I've run, whether it's for state senate, for county mayor, and for Congress in 2018. I had opposition, and we went to the delegates and engaged with the delegates and earned their support. So yes, I'm going to be gathering signatures, but I'm also going to be talking to delegates and showing up at the convention and think that and working to earn their support and asking for their trust once again. I'm going to be reminding them that I'm somebody who not only is right on the issues and agrees with them on most issues, but also that I'm somebody who has a track record of actually accomplishing things. And that, I think, is going to be what's unique amongst all of the candidates in this race, as I can point to a long list as state senator when I would pass 15 to 20 bills a session, as mayor with a long list of accomplishments on protecting our canyons, expanding access to childcare, expanding access to recovery, protecting LGBTQ equality, standing for women's choice and women's reproductive health. These are all things that we're going to be showing people that I've have actual, not just have stated my position and taken bold stances, but have actually achieved success that made a difference, a real difference in people's lives.
Yeah, I think we've spent a lot of time talking about the politics and everything. The way the election is shaping up in 2026, it looks like there could be a Democratic wave, maybe even a tidal wave brewing with the dissatisfaction among voters with the ways things are going. We've seen Democratic overperformances in every single election. There was one calculation that if the Democratic overperformance we saw in the Tennessee special election earlier this week were to hold across the country, Democrats would be looking at a majority of 267 seats, which would be a massive majority in the House. What kind of things would you want to get accomplished if you were elected and part of such a big majority of Democrats who would be able to, get these things through the Congress, or at least through the House, knowing that you may have a Republican Senate and obviously a Republican in the White House?
Look, I think the first thing that has to happen in the new Congress is standing up to the abuses of Donald Trump, that he has trampled on the Constitution, is disrespecting constitutional rights, and the harm that he's causing to American families, whether it's through, his actions, whether detentions and ICE detentions and the harm that he's causing directly, or through his tariffs that have driven up the cost of housing, driven up the cost of food. I think the first thing is going to be we need a Congress that will stand up to Donald Trump. Too many right now. We don't have a separation of powers. We don't have a separate branch of government that is standing up to the executive. Too many Republicans have either abdicated their responsibility, and many of them are even cheering him on. So I think the first thing is standing up to Donald Trump in a way that we can restore some of the really put meaning behind affordability, bringing down the cost of food by opposing the tariffs, bringing down the cost of housing construction by opposing the unconstitutional tariffs. The other things that I would work on, I love to nerd out on policy. So this is, don't get me started, I would say, but over the last 5 years that I've been outside of elected office, I've done a lot of work on housing affordability and housing policy. So my work is supporting cities across the country on policies to help them bring down the cost of housing in their jurisdictions. And we've worked with places like Atlanta and Cleveland and Columbus and Kansas City are places that we're working with on housing policy. I look forward to bringing forward some of the solutions that I've developed working with cities and states and counties, because there's things that the federal government can do to help to bring down the cost of housing, to expand housing construction, lower rents, home ownership. One of the things that I feel is unfinished business from my time as mayor was I was doing a lot of work leading for the protection of the Wasatch and the Wasatch Canyons. And we introduced legislation to create wilderness in the Wasatch Canyons to protect these pristine backcountry areas from development and overuse. And I look forward to introducing legislation that is driven by local stakeholder consensus, the hard work of like bringing people together and get consensus around some really tough decisions, and enacting permanent protections for the Wasatch, wilderness protections for the Wasatch. Protecting Medicaid and Medicaid expansion and what that's done to expand access to healthcare and the healthcare subsidies that have been so important to people's ability to afford healthcare. These are all things that I'm passionate about and really look forward to getting in and first of all protecting our democracy and then once hopefully getting back, looking forward to after Trump is gone. Looking forward to restoring a sense of normalcy in Washington, where our government actually works for the people that elect them there, and bringing forward solutions that are going to make a difference in people's lives. That's what I love about public service. I don't love, honestly, the food fight of public service, the Twitter battles, and the performative politics, trying to get eyeballs on your tweet. Or what I love is doing the heavy lifting of crafting policy, bringing together stakeholders, and identifying those solutions that are going to make a difference in people's lives.
Ben McAdams, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.